Yep, here we go. Okay, so let's just go back up top for a second, just for a brief second, so I can kind of talk about it real quick. So the algorithm overview, let's just read through the steps real quick. You label all nodes as unsettled, settled meaning visited in this case, so label all of them as unvisited. You set the distance to s to 0, set everything else to infinity, or integer max value. And we'll talk about why in a second. And then we have, of all of the unvisited nodes, choose the node with the smallest distance value, and that'll be the current node we are working on. And then mark that node as visited, and then relax all of its unvisited neighboring nodes with this fancy equation we'll talk about later. And then just keep doing this over and over again until you have either found your destination or all the nodes have been settled. Okay, now let's move down to the algorithm intuition proof real quick. So why don't we scroll down a bit here. All right, so why do we go up just a little bit to the first part. Yeah, right here. Initial setting of settled unsettled. We set all nodes as unsettled because at the beginning of the algorithm you haven't visited anything yet, right? So everything is unsettled because you haven't actually started your algorithm, you haven't visited any of the nodes yet. And one thing to keep in mind, and this is important, if you haven't visited a node yet, or when you visit a node, then you know that you have found the shortest distance to it. So the act of going to that node means you are certain that you have found the shortest distance. So keep that in mind. Initial setting of distances, we set the starting node to 0 because distance from source to source is always 0. We'll label the starting node as S. And everything else gets set as infinity because you haven't visited yet, so you don't know what the distance is. So we're going to set it to some value, and the best value to set it to is infinity. And the reason why we do that is because the moment you find any distance, that's better than no distance. So you want to make sure that that distance is less than whatever it's currently set to. If you set it to infinity, any distance will be better than that. So that's always something that we want to pick. All right, let's head down. The for loop, yeah, so this is where we left off. So the for loop contains basic part of this. Let's say that your job right now, we're going to keep it simple instead of doing the shortest path from home to library. We're going to do home to mall. This will be an easier example to deal with. So when you're standing at home, the only thing you can see is well, the distance to the grocery store is 2 kilometers, distance to mall is 6 kilometers, and distance to arcade is 4 kilometers. That's all you see. So Riley, why don't you scroll down to that sign again? Because you're starting at home, right? So yeah, scroll down to the sign, and we can just kind of show them what I was talking about there, right? So when the computer starts at the home node, right? So remember, this is that step where we're saying extract min, right? We're getting that minimum value. So right now the minimum value is just home because it's set to 0 and everything else is an infinity max value. So we just visited home. And because we just visited home, that means that the shortest distance to home is 0, and that makes sense since we're starting at home. And then we look at all of its neighbors, and we're standing at home. The computer sees this. It sees the distance to the grocery store is 2 kilometers. Distance to mall is 6. Distance to arcade is 4. This is all it sees. It doesn't see anything else. And remember, we're trying to find the shortest distance to the mall. So why don't we go back up to the graph again? Remember, since we haven't visited the grocery store, mall, or arcade yet, that means that we haven't found the shortest distance to it yet. So we're allowed to update that, because if we haven't found the shortest distance, we should keep trying to look for a better distance. So at the moment, grocery store, mall, and arcade are set to infinity max value, or integer max value. And we say, okay, in that case, let's say home to grocery store, it's 2 kilometers. And how long did it take us to get to home? That was 0 kilometers, so total distance of 2 kilometers. And 2 kilometers is better than max value. So we update grocery store to have a distance of 2 kilometers. The important thing to note here is that we haven't actually visited grocery store. We just said we are able to determine that a distance to the grocery store from home is 2 kilometers without actually having to go to the grocery store. And the same thing for mall and arcade, they get updated to 6 and 4, but we don't actually have to visit it. And this is important. When you're relaxing the neighbors, you aren't visiting them. You're just saying, okay, based on the information I have at hand, this is a better distance for it. So why don't you pull up that notepad again, and we'll kind of step through this. Now we're back to where we were before we left off. Okay, so at the moment we have grocery store set to 2, mall set to 6, and arcade set to 4. And we're trying to find the shortest distance to the mall. And I was talking to Riley about this earlier. Why don't we just say that the shortest distance is 6? And the reason because we're doing that is because we don't know that the grocery store doesn't have an edge to the mall. What if there was an edge from the grocery store to mall that was also 2 kilometers? In which case, the shortest distance would be 4 instead of 6, right? So, because of the fact that the other neighbors have shorter distance values, we can't guarantee that the shortest distance to the mall is 6, right? Now, I want someone to answer this question. If the distance to the grocery store was like 10 and the distance to arcade was like 8, what would be the shortest distance to the mall, starting from home?
Just straight to the mall.
Straight to the mall. And the reason why is because there's literally no way you could go from the grocery store to the mall or the arcade to the mall without going over 6. Because if the distance it takes to get to arcade is already greater than the distance takes to get to the mall, there's no possible way that the path to the mall can be found by going through the arcade. So that's kind of something to think about here. But based on this so far, when we extract min again, well, we want to find basically, well, what's the best case, right? The best case that we can have to get to the mall is by taking the shortest path that we have so far. And the shortest path we have so far is grocery store. There's nothing else that we can take that's shorter than the path to the grocery store. So we extract min and we go to the grocery store instead. Which means that the grocery store has now been settled because we extracted it from the heap and we just visited it, which means it has to be settled. We definitely just found the shortest path. So why don't we put like a little X to grocery store saying that we just found the shortest path. Alright, so the shortest path to the grocery store now is 2. We have guaranteed that. Now that we're standing at the grocery store, we see a different sign. In this case, the sign just points to the library saying 6 kilometers, right? So why don't we add a field for library now? Because now that the library was set to integer max value, but now we've perhaps found the shortest path, maybe found a or we just found a path. Might not be the shortest, but we found a path. So what is the distance from home to library now that we're at the grocery store? Let's say you are in person, you literally walked the 2 kilometers it takes to get to the grocery store, or you drove there. And you know that took 2 kilometers. And now you see a sign that says, well, from the grocery store to the library is 6 kilometers. Yeah, so we have 8, because you know it took 2 to get to the grocery store, and then plus another 6 to get to the library. This is important. This is this kind of relaxing step. To get the total distance to the library, this new distance to the library, you have to take the current distance of the node you're currently on, so that's distance of C, plus the weight of the edge from C to the neighboring node, which is library in this case. So you get 2 plus 6, you get 8. And then you check, well, is 8 better than what we have so far? To get what we have so far for the library, you just do library get value, and in that case it's max value, so 8 is less than max value, so we update it. That doesn't mean we found the shortest path to the library, which means we found a path. Now that we have this, we got to pick another extract min. What is the next extract min we pick? So we're getting the next smallest, right?
That would be the arcade.
Arcade, right? We always pick the smallest because if we pick the smallest, we can guarantee that we're not actually saying, oh, we forgot about this or we forgot about that. Because if we're picking the smallest, then that means that there's no way you can go through someone else, through another node, and then get to this node any faster because you're picking the smallest. So we pick 4, and that's arcade. So we just extracted min arcade. So what does that tell us about arcade then?
That it's shortest path.
Yep, shortest path. So we can mark it as visited, right? Remember, the act of visiting a node is saying that you found the shortest path. So arcade is visited, we have 4. Now we have to relax all of its edges. So we look at its neighbors, we have library and the mall. Now let's do the library first real quick. So if you want to go to the library through the arcade, what is the path so far that we found? So you take yep.
8 so far.
8 so far, yes. But if we want to go through arcade, so we're staying at the arcade. Let's say you drove to arcade, and then you're like, okay, well, if I took this 5-kilometer path to the library, what is the shortest path? Or not shortest path. What is the path of that?
It'd be 7 in total.
No, we're taking the direct edge. Remember, you're only looking at the direct edge. So you're going at 4, right?
Oh, 5.
5, right. So it'd be 9. So because remember, you don't know that there's an edge from the mall to the library yet. We haven't visited it. So the only thing you know is that, hey, I got to the arcade. There's a sign here that says 1 kilometer to the mall and 5 kilometers to the library. So like, well, if I took the edge to the library, that'd be 9 kilometers. But you know that back then when you visited a grocery store early on, that was 8. 9 is not better than 8, so you leave library as is. That make sense? Okay. Now we look, okay, well, let's look at the next thing. So we look at the mall and we're like, okay, it took me 4 kilometers to get to the arcade. I look at the sign and I see a sign that says 1 kilometer to mall from here. Which means that the total distance, if you go there directly now, is what?
5.
5. And so when you do that, you're like, okay, well, earlier it was 6. And 6 is not better than 5, so I'm going to say, okay, well, now I know that the better distance is actually 5, so I'm going to update that, and that's what you did there. And this is relaxing that edge. where you're saying, okay, well, actually, to the mall to relax that, not relax the edge, relax the neighbor. You're saying, okay, the better distance is actually 5 now. And that's all of the neighbors. So now we move on to extract min again. And what do we extract?
5.
Yep. So we extract them all. So we visit it. And at this point, we don't actually have to do any more work because we wanted to find the shortest distance to the mall. And the shortest distance in this case was 5 because we just visited it. So we remember when you visit something, you find the shortest distance. And since we just visited the mall, we found the shortest distance to the mall. So we don't need to do any work. Okay. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And the graph, the blog post has more like intuition, is more detailed, but I just wanted to kind of step through this kind of slowly like this. Get it quickly. Okay. So now let's go back